Old School 2003, Behind the Scenes and Crazy Movie Facts. What if I told you that one of the wildest college comedies ever made almost never saw the light of day, and that behind the drunken chaos, streaking scenes, and frat madness were real pranks, lawsuits, and unbelievable on-set secrets? Let's go behind the scenes of the 2003 hit Old School, where real life was even crazier than the movie itself. 1. Snoop Dogg's cameo was added at the last minute. Snoop Dogg wasn't in the original script at all. Todd Phillips decided just days before shooting the big party scene to bring him in for a surprise musical performance. Snoop agreed instantly, but only if he could perform Gin and Juice live on set. The crew had just hours to rework lighting, sound, and staging for the impromptu concert. It paid off. Snoop's brief appearance became one of the most talked about scenes in the movie and cemented Old School's 2000s pop culture vibe. 2. It was inspired by real-life college chaos. Todd Phillips had already made a controversial HBO documentary called Frat about wild fraternity behavior, so he had first-hand experience. Many scenes in Old School came from real frat stories he witnessed. Phillips once said, "It wasn't fiction. I'd seen adults act like that. I just put it on film." That raw, real energy gave Old School its chaotic authenticity. You can feel it in every beer pong scene, party montage, and disastrous prank, because some of it was based on reality. 3. Will Ferrell's streaking scene was completely real. Yes, that legendary "we're going streaking" scene wasn't fake. Will Ferrell actually ran naked through the streets of Pasadena, California, in front of random people who weren't extras. Phillips wanted the moment to feel spontaneous, so he told Ferrell to just go for it. Ferrell later joked, "When you've done enough comedy, you stop worrying about your dignity." His wife, however, wasn't as amused. She found out only when she saw the movie in theaters and said, "A little warning would have been nice." That scene became one of the most iconic moments in comedy history, all thanks to Ferrell's fearless commitment. 4. The frat house was a real house, and it drove neighbors crazy. The movie's main fraternity house wasn't a soundstage. It was a real suburban home rented for the shoot. It was an old, rundown property near Los Angeles that the crew completely transformed into the Lambda Epsilon Omega Frat. During filming, neighbors complained about noise, lights, and fake parties. One even thought an actual fraternity had moved in. By the time filming ended, the crew had accidentally created a mini college campus, and the neighborhood couldn't wait for them to leave. 5. Luke Wilson was the calm in the chaos. Director Todd Phillips said Luke Wilson was cast because he had the everyman face. In a film full of absurd characters, Phillips needed someone the audience could actually relate to. Wilson's straight man performance balanced out the wild energy of Will Ferrell and Vince Vaughn. Phillips said Luke was the emotional anchor. Everyone else was crazy. He made the film feel real. It's that balance between chaos and heart that made the Old School so memorable. 6. The cast wasn't allowed to drink on set. Despite all the beer pong, kegs, and alcohol-filled parties, the actors were not drinking real booze. Every beer was actually colored water, and every shot glass contained apple juice or iced tea. Ferrell once said they didn't need real alcohol to get wild. The script was already insane. Still, their acting was so convincing that crew members sometimes joked they couldn't tell who was drunk and who was sober. 7. The wrestling scene was a nightmare to shoot. The wrestling competition scene where elderly fraternity member Blue tragically dies mid-match became one of the funniest and riskiest parts of the film. Patrick Cranshaw, who played Blue, was 83 at the time. Everyone on set was nervous about filming anything too physical. They used a stunt double for the harder shots, but Cranshaw insisted on doing close-ups himself. After his real-life passing in 2005, Will Ferrell honored him by shouting, "You're my boy, Blue," at public events, the film's most iconic line born out of genuine affection. 8. The movie that almost got scrapped. Before Old School became a cult favorite, it nearly got canceled. When director Todd Phillips and writer Scott Armstrong pitched the idea about 3 men starting a college fraternity, studios thought it was too bizarre. DreamWorks executives said, "Who would watch grown men act like frat boys?" Phillips refused to give up. He argued that the story wasn't about immaturity. It was about escaping boring adult life. Eventually, DreamWorks took a risk, not realizing it would become one of the defining comedies of the early 2000s. 9. Vince Vaughn improvised half of his dialogue. Vince Vaughn's fast-talking character Beanie is full of sharp one-liners and sarcastic remarks, and most of them weren't scripted. Phillips encouraged Vaughn to improvise during takes, and what came out was comedy gold. The famous earmuffs moment, where Beanie covers his son's ears before swearing, was completely made up on set. Phillips later said, "When Vince starts rolling, you just let the camera run. You don't interrupt Genius 10. The movie almost got an NC-17 rating. Believe it or not, Old School was nearly rated NC-17 by the MPAA because of its language, nudity, and wild party scenes. The studio had to fight for an R rating by cutting just a few seconds of footage, mostly from the streaking sequence and a few explicit jokes. Todd Phillips joked that if they hadn't cut those scenes, no one under 30 would have seen it. Even with the edits, Old School pushed the boundaries of early 2000s comedy, and audiences loved it for that reason. 11. Critics hated it, but fans made it a hit. When Old School hit theaters in February 2003, critics called it immature and brainless. But audiences disagreed. The film earned $87 million worldwide on a $24 million budget. It exploded on DVD, especially among college students. Lines like "You're my boy, Blue" and "Frank the Tank" became pop culture catchphrases. Sometimes the critics are wrong, and the people decide what's truly funny. 12. The sequel that never happened. After the massive success of Old School, the studio immediately wanted a sequel called Old School 2, The Reunion. But Ferrell, Wilson, and Vaughn all said no. Ferrell explained, "It felt complete. Trying to redo it would have ruined the magic." Instead, Todd Phillips moved on to make The Hangover, another comedy masterpiece about men behaving badly. In many ways, Old School was the blueprint that paved the way for that next era of outrageous humor. 13. The legacy of Old School. 2 decades later, Old School still stands as one of the funniest and most quoted comedies ever made. It wasn't just about partying. It was about reclaiming youth, friendship, and freedom. The movie also redefined R-rated comedy in Hollywood. Without Old School, there might never have been Anchorman, or Step Brothers, or The Hangover. Will Ferrell became a household name. Vince Vaughn reinvented himself as a comedy star. And Todd Phillips? He went from frat parties to directing Joker, proving that even wild comedies can launch serious careers. If you enjoyed these behind-the-scenes secrets, don't forget to like, subscribe for more updates.